A client approached me about making her a 10-foot round diameter dining room table. The things that were important to her were a nice and thick profile, she did not want veneer, and she wanted the same coloration throughout the whole table. She wanted it to be a sunburst style pattern with the widest part of the triangles at least 20 inches wide. Well, after doing my usual research and searching for the right lumber or slabs, a few things became apparent. First, I wasn't going to find any dimensional walnut, or really any lumber for that matter, matching a minimum thickness of 3 inches and 20 inches wide. I mean, sure, maybe I could find a few, but not enough to make a 10-foot round table. So next up was to try to find some slabs that could make this happen. This was feeling more doable. With so many slab companies online, I was able to start searching. What I quickly found out though was that in order to get 17 triangles 5 foot long, 20 inches wide at its widest, it was going to end up taking around 5 to 7 decent sized slabs to make it happen. The big dilemma with this was there was a huge color variation between slabs, and being that that was one of our important factors, the options started to lose steam. Next, I found a few slabs from GL Veneer that were massive, which also means one thing. It comes with a massive price tag, right at like $24K to be exact. But what this did offer is a pretty consistent coloration throughout, a really thick profile, 20-inch plus wide triangles, and all 17 pieces that I could get out of this single slab. After a lot of conversations back and forth, this seemed to be the only option that checked all the boxes. So the client decided to give me a green light to make it happen. So after about 27K later, we had an incredible slab of Claro Walnut show up at my shop, ready to be chopped to pieces. Like every project, I really take my time and put caution into every cut. But this was another beast. Most of the time you get slabs like this, the slab makes up most of the table, or at least it makes it up with very few cuts. You know, a few cuts to square up the ends, maybe a few cuts to knock down any protruding edges. But with this one, I had to do some geometry to figure out the angles of 17 triangles that equaled a grand total of 360 degrees. Now sure, on paper, with a little math background, a lot of people can find that out no problem. But when you have a very rare $23,000, $24,000 slab that you have to trust in yourself to get it right, or you could potentially put yourself out of business if you mess this thing up, well, things get a lot more difficult whenever you start making these cuts.
So I'm almost halfway through chopping this thing up. Oh, this is just not a fun day right now. It's you know, it's what we wanted to do, what we set out to do. But it's just a tough thing to do. But here we go. Keep on pushing.
Every cut brings so much stress and anxiety, it honestly had me questioning this entire project. But there was really nothing to do at this point. I was committed, the slab was here, the client was counting on me, there was no turning back. So onward and upward.
So the first problem, first surprise, first thing that I didn't want to happen has happened. Still fixable, but nonetheless, I wish it wouldn't have happened. There's so much energy. You have this crotch here, and there's so much energy in this piece of wood right here. And as soon as I made this cut right here, pop, that crack hit. And I desperately need this triangle. So I'm gonna have to glue and join that piece back together when it's all cut free and I'm able to get to it. You know, all in all, it's going smooth so far, but unfortunately that happened, but it's fixable.
So now that all the pieces are cut and ready to, the next thing that I needed to focus on was keeping each piece as thick as possible. As I mentioned earlier, the thick profile was an important factor to consider.
Okay, so we have these flattened, we have these, and we have these guys flattened on one side. So 17 total. Now it's time to flip them over and start flattening the other side. So here we go.
When you flatten both sides, it's always a little bit deceiving, especially when you have so many different pieces. With 17 pieces, I'm kind of having to figure out the thinnest piece and then go off of the thickness of that thinnest piece. Does that make sense? Anyways, slow and steady seems to be kind of the theme of this table moving throughout the whole process. So really from here, it's all about perfecting these edges. I did a rough cut whenever I originally cut these triangles out, and I wanted to flatten them so that each piece would be nice and jointed. Now I've always kind of relied on my Tracksaw to give me perfect, nice straight edges, and especially if you throw that track on a flat piece, it's going to give you a perfect 90-degree cut. But apparently Tracksaws don't like to be dropped, because I did drop that a few weeks ago, and it is really coming back to bite me right here.
So I've noticed that whenever I'm putting these together, they're not jointed very well. I did drop the Tracksaw a few weeks ago, and that blade is drifting, and this is very unfortunate because I am at a standstill until I get another Tracksaw. Bummer. Okay.
Not to worry though, with a few clicks online, I was able to get a TS60 arrive at my shop just a few days later, and I was ready to get back into action. Now, with the TS60, I love the saw. It is amazing, but the depth is not quite that of the TS75. So what I was finding is, unfortunately, it was not making it through the entire thickness of this tabletop. It really wasn't a big deal though. It was just more of a nuisance than anything. Nothing that a little block planer couldn't knock down though. With this project, I felt like every time I got into a new phase or I moved on to something new, it felt like a milestone. Each thing that was completed came with its own little celebration. I'm not sure if it had to do with the relief that came with nothing going wrong during each part, or just how good things felt from a physical standpoint. And what I mean is that with each piece that I started to put together, the thing started getting exponentially heavier. So just maneuvering the pieces started to become a huge challenge just on its own. So much so that the delivery started to feel like really, really daunting. It was honestly starting to scare me a little bit. It was like every piece that went together, and the bigger this started to get, the more doubt that I started to kind of like let creep into my head.
Okay, so we have the 3 that I glued up yesterday. That's all dried and ready to go. I have one that has 4 pieces, another with 4, and there's another piece with 3, and then these 2 I can't join together. I have to fix this little corner right there because that will show in the future if I don't tend to it right now, so I'm going to work on that. And then this last piece, I have not cut that because I want to make sure whenever it comes to putting the last piece in that it fits correctly, and there's a chance that I need to adjust the size of this one so it can fit properly once I get to that final piece.
Now, this gets beyond woodworking, and I might be sharing too much here, but a lot of the times with whatever it is I'm working on, it could be a big project or even a small one, but imposter syndrome really starts to kick in for me. I know it's just an anxiety that I've always dealt with, and I try to work through it, but I think with the magnitude of this table, both like financially and physically, it really started to get to me. I started to question the simple things, the things I was usually so confident with. Those feelings that make you feel like this is over my pay grade. Now, I know that's not true, but in the moment, it was really hard to convince myself that that wasn't the truth. And, I think this is one of those things that many of you can relate to. With each new day and each new success, though, I started to get that confidence back a bit. It started to slowly trickle into my mindset. And before long, I was starting to get a little bit more present with what I was doing and not so intimidated each day. I started to enjoy the process and really soak in what I was really doing. I mean, I'm woodworking on a nearly $40,000 table. I'm getting to experience and work with a extremely rare, unbelievably beautiful, and so massive that you can't believe it until you see it in person, a $23,000 Claro Walnut slab. I mean, that doesn't happen every day. And, honestly, it might never happen again for me. And not to get too cheesy here, but that was the moment where all of a sudden I realized how lucky I was. The client did come to me for a reason, and I needed to really start trying to continue to trust my ability and enjoy this whole process again. And so from then, I started to enjoy it again, and things started moving and kept moving very nicely. I think as long as I focus on the task at hand and not get ahead of myself and let the fear of what hasn't even happened yet get the best of me, I think things are going to work out just fine. Now, just because I was feeling better and enjoying myself didn't mean that things didn't get challenging. I started to get this thing all glued up, and my goodness, it was getting heavy. I mean, how was I even gonna flip this thing over to the other side to work on it? But, there's still a lot of work to do, and I think I was just gonna let Future Bud deal with that. And what I also failed to mention earlier was that before we started cutting up the slab, the client decided to make a last-minute call to go from a 10-foot to a 9-foot round table. And let me tell you, I was pumped. Especially hindsight. Just taking off that 1 foot was going to help drastically when it comes to moving this thing around, and not to mention cleaning it when it was all finished up. And another little detail of the table. With this kind of build, we didn't want to try to attempt to bring all the points of the triangles together at one little pinpoint. So instead of that, we wanted to put a center circle to where all the triangles could kind of die into that circle. It was going to keep things nice and clean and, honestly have a great aesthetic look as well. All right, moving forward, I'm still really happy and honestly really proud of how all this is shaping up. Getting this last piece in and fitting nice and clean with tight glue joints felt so incredibly good. It was really a lot of planning and daydreaming and problem solving, math equations, sleepless nights, and so many other details that were all what seemed like was coming together in this very last piece. So when that piece was in and in place and glued up, I can't remember what drink I had that night, but I do know it had alcohol in it, and I do know that it was quite enjoyable. And now that I'm sitting here thinking about this whole narration process and what I need to say, it's really just kind of hitting me how all these projects and work pieces all seem to translate to life situations, Celebrate and enjoy all the wins, big or small. Take your time and try not to rush. Don't worry and dwell on the future because, you know what? It hasn't happened yet. Take things day by day. And guys, I know this is no profound ideology or anything, but it definitely holds truth. And yes, I'm talking to whoever will listen to me right now, but truthfully, I really feel like I'm just talking to myself to remind me that all of these things are true. So yeah, selfishly, I guess I am just talking to myself right now. Okay, back to the table. So cutting the perfect circle out of the table and fitting it with the perfect circle inlay sure was simplified with the Shaper Origin. It took all the jigs and the guesswork out of the process. And while Shaper has nothing to do with this video and no affiliation whatsoever, I definitely felt like I needed to give a little shout out because in this certain scenario, it really made this so simple and so precise that, you know what? It was really nice to have and I would highly recommend it. As you see, it made for the perfect fit here. All right, so flipping this thing, the moment of truth, what I've been worried about for quite a while now. And honestly, I didn't need to worry about this because you know what? It went pretty flawlessly. All the things that I was worried about, dropping it, the worst case scenario, having it fall on someone and, well, let's be honest, maybe kill them because it's so heavy, and having too much weight for it to seesaw or leverage back up on the work table. I was honestly worried it might break in half once you leverage it that way. And these were all the things that were kind of rushing through my head, but nothing happened. I hired a handful of guys and we flipped it, and then everybody went about their day after that, and so did I. This was starting to be a pretty exciting time to be a part of right here. I've been looking forward to this for a while, shaping the final shape, seeing this thing with all the final cuts completed. Yeah, I was excited because there was no more blades, no more potential bad cuts, or whoops, wrong line, or any of that, But more than anything, I was so excited to see the table, to get a true idea of what it was going to look like. I mean, lots of time envisioning this in my head, but now I could finally see it. A tangible item. A heavy tangible item, but nonetheless, a tangible item. So moving forward, there are a few things to deal with. The base. Now, the base was going to be made custom by a local metal fabrication business. And a little shout out to Blue Goose Customs. They made it and they did an amazing job. They were in the works on the table, so I could kind of take that off my plate and not have to worry about that. Next was sanding. A lot of sanding. A lot of sanding. And then after that was putting on a coat of Rubio Monocoat on the bottom of it. Now, I really never do this, but with this situation, I decided to finish the bottom completely. And even barely sanding the top, I just didn't want to have to flip this thing more than we had to. But other than that, with a little more finish work and a little more Rubio Monocoat, this thing was a wrap. A wrap on the work, that is, but we still had to deliver this guy. And that was definitely nerve-wracking to think about how we were going to do that. When I first started thinking about delivery, I reached out to some local moving companies, and nothing against anyone, they just physically didn't have the correct setup to deliver this thing. I mean, you couldn't lay it flat across a flatbed trailer. It was too wide, it was 9 feet. It would take up a whole lane, or at least you would have to have a wide load, and we wanted to try to avoid that. And the next option was to kind of set it diagonal, and that really just sounded like a disaster, to be honest with you. And then the other option was to stand it straight up, and not many people had the correct truck to do that. But I did find one company out of Dallas that did an amazing job, and they came fully equipped with the correct truck and with the right help, with the right blankets, and they tackled this project no problem. I was very impressed and super pleased that I found these guys. So if anybody is looking for long distance movers, Goodfellas Relocation, and I will definitely throw that into the notes. So there you go. That's what an almost $40,000 table looks like and takes to build. I learned so much along the way. I feel like I gained a lot of confidence throughout this build. I definitely went on an emotional roller coaster at times, but I'm so grateful to have this opportunity and this on my resume. If you made it this far in the video, guys, thank you so much for following along and checking out my work. It would help me hugely if you would hit that subscribe button, and that would help me continue doing this. Until next time, thank you guys.